Eddie, can you talk about your grandparent Richardson?
Yeah, easily. I happen to have the good fortune of having lived with them for 6 months in order to teach them how to drive. Because neither one of them drove. They drove had an ox cart. That's how I first did not know it. I was an infant and just was born. They practiced uh, herbal medicine. They were supposedly quite good. I was born with a blue baby attached to my mother through an umbilical cord, and they were on the spot, and knowing what to do. Even though the doctor had not made it there, they knew how to treat me after I was separated from my mother. They had this concoction, the eye drop with them. Using an eyedropper, they had crushed wild black cherries, with moonshine, and it obviously worked because I'm alive, still at 75. Um, but my grandfather was a fiddler. My grandmother had 16 children, was pregnant 16 times, and she provided milk to the entire neighborhood, breastfeeding to the neighborhood as a young woman. And she had 8 kids, 7 boys and one girl. Well, they actually had another girl that was stillborn. But anyhow, my grandmother had been married to a Bob Dorman, who later became my uncle. He married by marrying my dad's sister, one of my dad's sisters. But then after divorcing Bob Dorman, she married Robert Crosby Richardson, and of course he was a fiddler, a carpenter, a cabinet maker, and just a fine artist. And she would play dance jobs on the weekend, and he was the fiddler and calling the dances, and she played the whippoorwill. And grandma was a very good, attractive woman, especially in the younger days. She gained some weight later on. I shouldn't be saying this, but I am. But she knew some things, and she did some things that my mother didn't know about, and only I found out about later. But grandfather, he worked at a shipyard in Mobile for most of his life, especially during the war years in World War II. And was a carpenter, board ship, and a cabinet maker. And we got to know he buy his groceries in Mobile and carry them by freight train, passenger train really, up to Seaboard, Alabama, which is about 56 miles away from out of Mobile, but not by train, not by rail, but shorter than the road. Then we get up Seaboard and his groceries there, but he got to know Mr. Greer. I'm trying to remember his first name. Sam, if I remember correctly, but got to know him real well, and he developed a chain of food stores, Greer's, which is a corporation now. Which is, by the way, grandfather insisted that I came to live with him that I work for Greer's, and of course he told Greer's he would hire me. But that was handy because he'd always on Saturdays he'd call me at the store to give me a list of groceries to buy and bring them home. So that did. And let's say neither of my grandparents drove, but I mentioned too that he drove an ox cart. They had an horse's name was Ben. Not horse, excuse me, the oxen, and the cart. But he built the church at Bethel Methodist Church. He and my uncle Joe Wheat, one of grandmother's brothers, and of course I had one of his saws, one of grandpa's saws, but the Wheat family has most of the tools that they used to do. But he made coffins. People did to be buried. You know, he'd leave their coffin, and of course grandmother would do the quilting, if you will, around the coffins and the fine work, the artistic work, you know. And it's something a lot of folks don't know. But he was a quiet, Grandpa was a quiet man, very muscular, not that tall, maybe about 6 feet tall, very, very muscular, quiet. If you can imagine a musician being quiet, but him being a fiddler made it a little different. He pretty much was raised to his, like, not exactly an orphan, but he was kind of a loner. The Bolton family, I believe you found out, out of Birmingham, Alabama. I could talk about him all day, but he had some philosophies. He was very strict about money. He never went anywhere without a dime in your pocket. I guess because of the law of the land in those days, you know, you didn't ever go anywhere without money. So he was very, very good. They took me in, and I say I'm just to this day thankful that I did get the opportunity to know him real well. And he, by the way, I left out the fact that he worked on a railroad with Will Rogers. So he has a lot of stories to tell about that. That's how the music came about, you know. So it's somewhere stored in my memories back there, somewhere with these early morning and late night. Now I got to tell you this. This is a ritual. When I was there, I would take him out to these various homes where he contracted to do that cabinetry, if not the carpentry, the other carpentry work. But he'd always have me drive through town, go to the drugstore being the ABC store, that being the liquor store, and to make me not be talking about his drinking, he'd offer me a drink first. And I'd accommodate him. I didn't take a drink, but I stuck the bottle to my tongue and stopped it because I could stand to see the smell of it. And but he'd sit there and he'd finish that pint, and he'd be about, guys would be closed about that time at night in his bedroom. He'd be sitting inside his bed. And I'd be sitting, there's a telephone between the two of us. We'd just sit there and talk. He talked, I didn't talk. And he could almost reach around the corner there and get his bottle, you know, because he kept it on the porch, just outside the bedroom. And but grandmother, she did not approve of that at all. I found out later, so a secret about her too, you know. But now grandmother, she was very, very fine lady. She loved her garden, she loved her house, and she kept it fine. She loved good stuff. She owned when they first moved to Citronelle from Seaboard, she bought a laundry and finish business, and she had that and ran that right by the bank and between the bank and the jailhouse. But I spent many a day down there with her, not at that time because she'd already sold it by the time I moved down there with them. But just besides all of it, then later she used her house, their house, to board some oil men when they struck oil there in Citronelle, you know, and I was surprised, by the way. Came in sudden boom town and covered with oil people and no place to stay. So she did that, and coming out of the Navy, it was right near Christmas time, and she was going to spend the Christmas with us in Chatham. And so I went down to, of course, I was married by the time, and anyhow, I went down to pick her up in Citronelle, and she said, this is Christmas. And I said, yeah, I know it's Christmas. Well, what does that mean? I said, nothing. They're giving, receiving, mainly giving, some of this philosophy, you know, and she said, no, this time with some eggnog. And I said, well, I got the eggnog there. But it's not complete. What do you mean not complete? We got to get us packed. I said, don't you tell Berta. That's my mother, of course. My mother didn't know she'd have a drink. And, but I might add right here too that she dipped snuff. You know, didn't add up to me. Snuff is not meant to be dipped. I do know that for a fact. It's what he sniffs, not so to death. Well, to sneeze. When you sneeze, that's the closest thing to death you can get.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's what snuff was meant for. But anyhow, she'd dip it, and that came to be a problem too. I went to get married, and she couldn't carry that spittoon with her, you know. So she smoked cigarettes with me, kind of hid around that corner and she smoked. But found out about the eggnog. She had to have it spiked. Didn't want Berta to know. But just, I took her, she had, before I got married, she had get her stamp of approval on Barbara. She did. And I made sure she did. She was the first person I introduced Barbara to down there. I took her to get her clothing to go north, and she had to be just so. And she did ride with me up there and rode back. And of course, she had a son along the way, Odell, who was at Fayetteville, North Carolina, jumping out of airplanes, and career Army. So we spent the night going up and coming back from my wedding. And that in Fayetteville, and but grandmother just one kind. She lost her leg just before she died from this medicine. I'm trying to think of the name of it. I took some of it myself till I realized what it was. Just couldn't go on that. She didn't sing, but she raised what's the hellions. I know that. Raised an angel and the rest of them. I don't know. They were good people, all musicians, and she had loads and loads of friends. And that's.
Let me ask you a question go back to Robert there. You said he worked on the shipyard, Crosby.
Yeah.
Carpenter.
And cabinet maker.
Okay, for the ships themselves.
Ships, yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. And he died in '57. Do you know how he died?
Yeah, stroke.
Stroke.
He had a stroke, and he worked on the outside of his house on the ladder, worked on the window, fell, and he died. Literally from that.
Really?
He had a stroke and fell.
Now he built the house, did he not?
No, not that he lived in.
Yeah.
No, they bought that. He didn't need doing the work on it either. He wouldn't do work around his house.
Oh, that's right.
Except that day he died. He got killed. Remember, my train of thought just left me here. Just a sec. Yeah. Can you stop?